Oh, it's a true story, a native inmate told me. This is an old story told to me from a few years ago. I was just reminded of it a couple days back when retelling it, and I'm curious if anyone else has ever heard of this or if it was made up by the person who told me it. Commercial, I suppose I would try and make a fun one. I used to work at a maximum security prison where I was in charge of overseeing the production of food. Not a CO by any means, and I was able to talk to the inmates very frequently. One early morning, I was doing paperwork when one of the inmates was doing some sort of stalking, and we were talking about urban legends. This man was Native American, I think Navajo, but I could be wrong. He will be dubbed Storm for the same of this story. And Storm told me about a legend and an experience he had on his reserve um, about some sort of devil, a devil called Hoofy. He claims there is this handsome man with a tall white cowboy hat and boots that frequently goes into casinos. He doesn't gamble. He flirts with beautiful young women and lures them out of the casino. Once he takes these women to his home, he transforms into this tall creature with shaggy goat legs and long black hair. His beautiful face turned into a mix of a demonic horse and a wolf with piercing red eyes. He devours these women and leaves their clothing around his homestead as a memento of his killings. I laugh because it sounded like a typical monster, but Storm gets serious and then tells me that he had a close encounter with Hoofy and he barely made it out alive. Storm and his cousin lived in an Arizona reservation on the other side of South Mountain, very close to my hometown, in Estrella Mountain. One day, he and his cousin were drinking and trying to pass the time as there wasn't much to do. They decided to take a walk into the desert just for the hell of it. Not much else to do anyways. It was about half an hour or so from sundown, so the two tread off in a direction and enjoy the scenery of the plain desert. They walk for about 15 minutes or so when they come across this abandoned church-like building. It was old and decrepit with weak wooden structures that looked as though a stiff wind could break down the church. The two walked through the church and out the back, walking through broken pews and the floor creaking with each step. They laughed about how freaky and weird this old building was before slowly making their way out. They walk out the door and jump over a trench just past the back end of the church. The pair continued to walk and laugh when they came across something strange. The Storm says that he saw a wide arrangement of shoes, muddied red high heels, black flats, torn brown pumps, an assortment of women's shoes scattered around them that were broken and dirty, clearly abandoned for some time. Storm picked up a shoe to inspect it when he turned to his cousin. The look on his cousin's face was that of complete and utter horror. His face was pale and his eyes were wide, close to tearing, and he was looking behind Storm. Storm was about to turn around when his cousin stopped him. "No," he whispers, placing his hands on Storm's shoulder. "Don't look up. Keep your head down, man." Frightened, Storm follows his cousin's words. He had never seen his cousin so freaked out. Then he heard it, a pair of heavy footsteps walking behind him, the sound of labored breathing matching with the steps, and Storm feels as though his whole body felt 10 degrees colder. His shoulders were shaking when his cousin pulled his hand and stepped back slowly. "You see what I put these little We need to go." His voice was nearly lost in the heavy steps behind him, but Storm heard him just barely. "Whatever you do, don't look back," was the last thing his cousin told him before he booked it. The pair ran as fast as they could, sprinting past the old church and running to their homestead. His cousin yelled out native prayers in hopes that some sort of ancestral guardian could stop this beast. All the while, Storm could hear the galloping of hooves behind them, the feeling of the creatures breathing against the back of his neck. a Mendery, breathing in hell, the poor creatures leaping into the air and letting out a sigh of relief, for he knew he would be his creature's next meal if he slowed down one bit. the rain cutting the time back to their home in half. They safely did make it back inside their home just as the sun was setting, bathing their home in a warm, orange glow. Panting against the wall, Storm placed a hand over his fast beating heart, scared of what he might see. But he had to know. Storm stumbled to an outside window and pulled back a blind, peering out into the dusking landscape in the direction that they came from. Storm could see the back of the creature walking away. 8-foot tall being with long, silky black hair that reached its waist. Where human legs should be, instead was a pair of long, goat-like legs with black, stamping hooves that kicked up dust as it walked away. Did you encounter a skinwalker, or was it something else? So, this experience is one I never shared with anyone besides my brother. When I was about 13 years, I was living in rural BC. One night, I was in the hot tub on the deck outside just watching the woods, taking in the silence. It was winter time, and we just recently had a snowfall that left around knee-height deep of snow. It was around 2-3 a.m., and out of nowhere, this very large wolf, bigger than one I have ever seen by far, came out of the woods. I remember its coat being a shimmering silver and its bright, piercing green eyes. I screamed in agony, shuddering and shaking and sobbing, until I felt like even side-lowering and shaking would scream and shaking. Government Handbook of Abuse came along. 5 years later, we're still friends. As this wolf was walking along the fence of our paddocks, it locked eyes with mine, and we just kind of stared at each other as he walked past me, both alone in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. What happened next till this day instantly makes my spine shiver. As the wolf walked past, he walked towards our barn with our horses in it. It became darker as it entered the barn, but the other side of the barn still had a bright light illuminating the outside that I could clearly see. This wolf, as it entered, halfway through, it went from the shape of a wolf to a very large, broad-shouldered person. The horses didn't make a single sound, and this person, that now stood roughly 7 feet tall, rounded the corner towards the open field but didn't emerge from the other side. And I never saw it again. My brother had his own encounter with this same wolf, I'm guessing. He told me that he woke up randomly one night from the feeling of being watched. He then looked out his window to see a very large wolf walking away from his window, so I'm guessing it was watching him sleep. This place we lived at was old native ground. Our barn was an old school house where the Catholic priests would put the native children and teach them lessons on Christ. It even had the old desk and chairs inside still. My brother and I both saw children's faces in the panes of glass from that barn and lights turning on randomly. We had closet doors slam repeatedly for minutes at a time, footsteps and feelings of being watched. In my room, I saw glowing red eyes on the ceiling and I hid under my covers till morning. Anyways, my main subject of this post and what I'm more seeking answers for is, what did I encounter outside in the middle of the night? After I looked around myself, the closest thing I could find was skinwalkers or wendigos. But I read these creatures have deformed features or things that make them uncanny or straight up horrific. What I saw, nothing struck me as abnormal about this wolf besides its massive size until it literally changed its entire form in front of me. I know this is a long-winded read. Sorry, I'm not a great storyteller, and there's just so much that I experienced at this property that this just scratches the surface to everything. The wolf incident is just something that I've never really been able to grasp, and I always wanted some kind of answer because it feels and sounds unbelievable. I also understand that the term skinwalker is Navajo lore and doesn't correlate with BC tribes, but this is just the representation of what I saw with the closest accuracy.